This is one of the most adorable things I've ever seen. How have I not played this already? And also, holy shit. That. Just that. I know you might not be able to hear this through just the recording, but I couldn't possibly thank all of you enough for not even just watching the video, just considering it. Just adding another point to that views counter has honestly helped a lot. And it was one of the things that I really needed, going into the end of this hellish year of 2022. And I couldn't possibly thank all of you enough for just watching, for liking, for leaving, all that support. The Linux video, considering what it is, you were just talking about a stupid Penguin operating system. And the response I have gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. That is something that unanimous kind of sort of approval is something I have never seen before. And not that I'm just saying that this is what I want to see for everything I make in the future, but I won't lie that I was kind of expecting to get more attention, but I just didn't expect it to be as positive as it ended up coming out to be. Part of the mindset of when I was going into making the Linux video was this was indeed something that I was extremely passionate about. Even before kind of jumping into things with the whole retrospective that I made back in September, I always had intentions of, ever since the retrospective video, I have always had intentions that one of the things that I would do was the Linux video. And it was mostly because I felt it was something that I had started to feel extremely passionate about, which is something that I don't think I would normally say about a lot of things, but not just the Linux movement, but kind of just bringing my thoughts out there to talk about how Linux has developed over the course of 2022 and bringing to light, my experiences was something that I've always, it was a tale that I always wanted to tell. And just the fact that it has gotten that much attention wasn't part of the plan, but is something that I still can't help but appreciate nonetheless, even though I know I'm repeating myself, but God, it does mean a lot to hear that kind of response. And in a way, it is also the kind of validation that I needed going into the end of 2022, because I'm not going to lie when I say that I wasn't it's going to be kind of a little bit hard to portray accurately here, but this was something that kind of ended up bringing up over on Mastodon, which at this point is pretty much the only social presence I have. But I wasn't in a good place, like mentally speaking or emotionally speaking, going into like the end of November, and especially throughout most of December. 2022 has meant a lot of changes in my life because of just a number of events that had happened. So going down the list here, 2022 was even just going back into December. I had found out that me and the family were moving. We had lived in Jersey City from my perspective, it's my entire life was spent in Jersey City where I was born. And I had lived pretty much the entirety of like my like conscious life as far back that I can like vividly remember, which was from like the age of 6 or so. I had lived in the same exact house, in the same exact apartment, with almost the same family for 20 some odd years. Or actually, it's like 18, 19 years, but pretty much my entire life was lived in the same place. So it wasn't until in December that, well, things had kind of been getting a little bit hard for us. We were already kind of financially strapped. House was already mortgaged some time ago. We had pretty much no income, virtually no income, because I had just gotten out of college, literally, like when I got my associate's degree in computer science. That was literally the month that COVID hit. And so right when I was about to... So right when the plan was to transfer to getting my 4-year degree was exactly the point that the world decided to shit itself, and we pretty much were locked home. My parents pretty much lost their jobs, unfortunately, because they mostly end up working in New York, which I know I reference this guy a lot, but Louis Rossman kind of accurately depicts just how shitty New York is as a place, especially for like United States standards, which is already really fucking low. It's not a great place to be. And so, long story short, they've been out of jobs. I just got out of school. No work experience. I worked some part-time in the latter part of like my 3rd year in college, but unfortunately, this is how the recording is going to go, isn't it? I had pretty much no work experience, though I had worked some part-time in going into my 2nd or 3rd year of college. I had virtually no like real practical experience, and because everything was starting to move into from home, that was not something I was prepared for in the slightest. Because something, if you're going to learn about me, is that I have a lot of trouble with transitioning into new things. Without going into extreme specifics, because frankly, it's extremely depressing and I don't think a lot of people would want to hear this. But essentially, I can work well in situations where I am prepared if I am given the information and if I am able to like enact upon things in like an orderly manner. Those are the kind of environments that I work best in. And remote work was not something I was prepared for at all. And I simply just didn't feel very confident in like working those kinds of jobs, especially for the first time. There were a lot of moments I honestly felt like a burden to both my family and also any would-be employers who, I would be working under, presumably. So, unfortunately, we kind of had to wait out most of the pandemic through 2020 and through 2021. But things had gotten kind of so bad, a mix of like family passings, and also a lot of family drama and just strife in general, that we had made the really hard decision to move away from the place I had lived in for my entire like consciously living life to somewhere else. And so we moved over to like a really nice place in Pennsylvania, in Reading, if you happen to care. It was hard getting to that point, and there were a lot of cases, a lot of moments in the process of transferring our stuff and also getting the place bought. There were a lot of moments that we just straight up felt like we were probably like a day or two shy of basically just having to foreclose the entire property, and we were just going to be stranded, which has caused a lot of mental trauma for pretty much everyone involved. It wasn't just me in this case. But eventually we did it. And so with that, we managed to move over into the new place, which, at first we were feeling, we felt pretty good about things. We were feeling relatively confident that the move would go well, and that the idea being that this was going to be a fresh start. We were going to be starting over in general to a new place, new neighbors, new living situation, new environment, new everything. And that would also include, presumably, a new relationship with the parents that I live with. Because if you can't tell, I'm certainly not living alone. I have unfortunately been living with family for pretty much my entire life as well. Even though I have had vague ideas of wanting to move out at some point, but because of the aforementioned pandemic, that wasn't going to be happening for a little bit longer. So in the meantime, I'm just going to be... And now my phone is deciding to go off. Great. So living with my parents is just going to have to stick around for a little bit longer. And I was kind of hoping that things would maybe improve, but unfortunately, throughout the past couple of months, hasn't really improved at all, unfortunately. In fact, in a lot of ways, it has actually gotten worse. I'd already felt distant from, my parents had divorced a long time ago, so I was already, unfortunately, kind of feeling a little bit vengeful about the whole situation. Not vengeful, but it hurts to kind of see the people that you want to love equally, and there's this whole he said, she said dynamic, and the two people that you looked up to the most as your parent figures just moving away, deciding to kind of brush it under the rug like it never happened. Was a really hard thing for me to kind of move past. And unfortunately, my mother's fiance isn't exactly that much better. In a lot of ways, I don't want to do this. I really hate, it's the kind of thing that I went into with the Linux video. I don't want to make judgments or assume something just based off of only a few personality traits. I really hate doing that because it makes me feel like a shitty person, because that's something I had to deal with a lot myself. So I would be a hypocrite if I decided to kind of impose my own kind of thoughts on a person before I really got to know them. So I don't want to I didn't want to jump into conclusions and just outright say, "Oh, this person's a shitty guy. I don't want them to be here." Unfortunately, that mindset has been proven horribly, demonstrably wrong, time after time after time after time after. How many times has it been? I don't know. That's the problem. He is not, of course, the new marriage is not the problem. It's just that I feel like they've both have kind of brought each other down in the time that we've spent kind of distanced away from one another throughout the pandemic. And so going back into a situation where we kind of have to live in relative harmony hasn't really worked out, because we're starting to realize that our personalities clash a lot. This person is significantly more he is assertive, and he is a man. In a lot of the ways that I am a man too. But he has such a combative personality that I simply just cannot jive with. That's not something I want. I am not a combative person. I will say things. I will say a lot of things that, might be hot takes for a lot of people. It will be very contentious, the kind of thoughts I will have, about topics in the future. But just someone who doesn't back down from his own opinions, where I'm the opposite. I'm the kind of person who will happily hear someone out, even if it's not something that I would inherently agree with. I still want to see their points. And this is someone who basically doesn't do any of that and will constantly fight them into basically trying to brute force their way into proving that they're right all the goddamn time, has worn me down so significantly. And we have shown time and again that we are simply like diametrically opposed to each other. We are not two compatible beings. And unfortunately, it kind of puts my mother in a situation that she wants us to both coexist, but we simply cannot with each other. So they're constantly put in a state where they have to distance themselves from me, and I'm constantly put in a state where I am constantly in like fear and worried that something that I may or may not do ends up actually, causing them to like justify their hatred towards me even more. And that's like that's not really something I've had to deal with before. And I just can't help but think that with him around, that it has caused like their family life to degrade significantly. Like these people have drinking nights all the time where I have legit on now several occasions, at least three occasions, I have heard loud noises and I come down and see that they're, just having a rowdy old time, drinking their hearts away at like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. I go upstairs to do other things, whether that's gaming or more than likely I'm going to be working on one of my projects at that point. And then I hear like slamming noises and like yells 30 minutes later. And I find that part of the property is broken. And these two are in such a drunken stupor that they have riled themselves up to the point that they will fight each other and break shit. They've broken the floorboards a few times, and on one occasion has outright broken the glass on like one of the windows, like just punched it straight through, out of a completely irrational they're just drinking so hard that they lose their goddamn minds. That's basically the only way to put it. And none of this happened, in the years before. It's only happened ever since this individual came into our lives, and so it's just kind of caused a lot of trauma for me. And some of the things that they have said, even though I knew that it was all because of their they can't think straight. That's the problem. But when you have someone charging at you, trying to punch your fucking face in, saying that you're fucking worthless and you should go commit things that you probably shouldn't be saying on YouTube, and just all these other expletives and stuff like that. I don't take that necessarily personally, but it really starts to make me wonder, why do I even bother? What's the point? Like, what am I actually really doing here? Because I haven't been able to get a job since we moved here. And that's not for lack of trying. It's simply because the area that we're in is so sparse that, going from the city life, and even in, eastern New Jersey, in the New York area, everything is easily accessible on foot, on bus, on some kind of public transit. You can take a bus to light rail to subways, etc. You can get to anywhere on foot, so it almost makes no sense to have a car. But in Pennsylvania here, at least, it's kind of the exact opposite in the area that we're at, where we can walk down like 15 minutes to the local stores. But that's literally all that really exists in walking distance. To get to like any business or, other like city, to get to like the city areas pretty much requires a car. And I have neither the license at the moment, just because of some other circumstances, nor the money to actually afford a car. And that car that we do have is owned by the asshole that I simply am not compatible with to begin with, And I'm constantly thinking that they will probably take the chance that they can get to fucking drive me off the side of the highway and leave me for dead. That is something that I have genuinely thought was going to happen to me if I ever tried. So I simply couldn't bother working. And as a result of that, I ended up doing YouTube. Yeah, it's kind of weird when you put it that way. It sounds ridiculous, but that's actually what kind of ended up happening, is that as a result of a lot of the things that are happening at the home, and out of frustration of not being able to get like reputable work outside of working at a McDonald's, which I already know that once you go to fast food for work, you basically will never expect to see yourself leave that place again. It's going to do a lot of nothing. And I am simply, as a person, not built for the retail life. So, in absence of finding like actual work to do to bring in the money and pay some of the bills, which I want to do, but simply have not been able to ever since we moved, even before we moved. So in absence of a real job, I essentially started, investing into creating video content and making weird retrospectives about things I enjoy. That essentially was kind of part of the impetus of me starting this channel the way that it is now, and creating the Urban Rain retrospective. So I found myself starting to do video content. In part, at first, it was me learning how to use video software like DaVinci Resolve, effectively just to pass the time, basically. It was me trying to do other things aside from just playing games in and out every day, to kind of feel like I was doing something relatively productive. If anything could keep my mind off of the kind of crappy situation I'm in, anything could keep me from driving me insane, it's probably going to be learning a new skill with Skillshare, who is not a sponsor of this video, and I probably won't be accepting sponsors like that anytime soon. But for things I'll get into later. But yeah, I essentially kind of started making that out of a willingness to do something new. And once I kind of got far along with it, when I started to realize, wow, I actually have a lot to say about this game. Which, first off, in terms of like kind of content that it has, Urban Rain, I will still go on to say, is a very important game to me in a lot of ways, especially now. And I will still go and say that it is a very enjoyable game, but it has about a combined total of like 4 to 6 hours of content. And even for PS2 standards, that's pretty low. And it has a lot of contentious aspects to it that makes it extremely interesting to dissect, but also does mean it's going to be a lot harder to kind of convince someone to play this, just purely off of your own personal bias. But I found that I was having like a lot of things to say, a lot of criticism, a lot of praise, or just things that I wanted to see more of in games today, especially being on Linux, as what would come to be very clear. That some games that you might be able to play, you can't really do because some developers are kind of assholes like that, and they don't let you play games that you want on the operating system that you want. But that's a tangent I already run into. Anyways, so I had so much to say about this game that it's essentially what had me thinking, well, if I can make a full script out of this, then why not go for it? Why not make this of all the things, the thing that'll get me out there into the world? Because up until that point, the channel existed for several years. Of course, at the start, it was just to have a place to so I can subscribe to other channels. It wasn't until 2016 or 2018 that I decided to make content in massive fucking air quotes. I did a variety of things with the old channel back then, but I'm not going to lie when I say I was never really happy with it. There's a kind of a variety of circumstances surrounding that, though. 2016 was the time that I was getting into college in the first place. So 2016 was about the time that I was getting into college in the first place, and just a lot of, school stuff. I hardly had the time to like commit to anything. And I was also getting into a bunch of other things at the same time, whether that be video games, or, and I'm going to start embarrassing myself here, getting into roleplay. So I had ideas for a bunch of things, both for video content creation and not, that I simply was starting to feel a little bit schizophrenic, and I started to become very much aware of that I kind of just stopped. I didn't have the time for it, so I decided I was just gonna put it down and come back to it much, much later when I actually have like the time or the place to do it in. Because the environment that I was doing all that old stuff was at the old family house with like the crappiest equipment possible, and my PC just wasn't up to the task at the time. And I also just didn't know what I was doing. It was incredibly unfocused. And that was kind of part of the problem, is that I don't look back very fondly on my old stuff at all. Like, yeah, sure. In like the normal creative kind of sense, you create a project that you spent like an actual month, weeks, days of like in and out, just sitting on your ass in front of a glowing screen with your glowing keyboard and, weird ass gamer mouse, just staring at pictures and your own stupid voice, trying to make it into something that's vaguely watchable, that presents your opinions on stuff that you don't even really know is going to actually work out. And then you do. And for like the first 5 minutes, you say, that's actually kind of good. 2 days later, you come back to it and say, wow, there's a lot of things that I could have done better. Or that didn't age well. Or this is just shit. Normal content creator mindset is that you're always kind of thinking to ways to improve yourself, and you just tend to think nothing but the things that you missed, the things that the people didn't get to see. But in terms of the stuff that I made, quote unquote, in 2016 through to 2018, was things that I just simply couldn't find any way of being proud of whatsoever. It was awkward. I simply was still trying to hide behind an alias, like even more so, not just in like a sense of this is my personality. I was doing it because I was afraid of presenting myself while kind of still trying to, but I was doing it for friends that I guess had at the time. Friends, who imagine that, having any of those. But generally I was unfocused, didn't really have a personality, didn't really have an idea of what I was doing. I was just doing things to do them, and it just didn't work out. But now, things are much different. The way that I ended up going out with the UR thing, going all the way and making notes about, each and everything that I have as I go through the game, and, retrospective thoughts and just other things that I have in mind. I'm going to put these down, line by line on notes, and then essentially transcribe that into a workable script, proofread the shit out of it, organize it, and make it, allow it to flow. Find a way to make that jumble of text of random thoughts that I have flow in a way that can be, somewhat coherent and work in a video format. And then going through all this trouble to getting the footage, as much of it as humanly possible. I was making that video with the intention of 100%ing the game. And I got really goddamn close until I just realized I probably should not do that at that point. Priorities. Which is something that I'm very glad to have learned about. But went ahead and got all the footage together. Started learning how to properly speak into a microphone and use it. Even with the snowball, as kind of bad and tinny as it was, I was learning how to actually produce a video. And as I was going through and putting it onto Resolve, learning just how necessary like intermediate video formats were, and fuck DNxHR in particular, because man, those file sizes are fucking brutal. And the seek times on a mechanical hard drive, you don't want to know the pain I went through going through an actual 2 terabytes worth of stuff for the Linux video alone. That's why I say don't do video content creation, because it'll drive you fucking insane after a while. But I did it anyways. And weeks passed, going through several days, hours at a time of making this thing happen, making jokes, making running gags and themes, and I managed to use these random assets that I had just sitting around, not really getting used, and I'm finally putting them to use. And then going on to the chill games video, and I was starting to like actually figure out a kind of style I wanted to go with, and the sorts of things I wanted to do. Things slowly came together, and, you know, despite all of the doubts that I have, because one of my biggest problems is strength and a curse, but I fail to see where the strengths come from this, is that I am an extremely self-conscious person. I am so damn self-aware to the point that it's almost, you know, crippling in many ways. But I went ahead and did these things anyways. And this is the very first time I, first put myself out there in voice form, and then in the second video, and in the third one and on, presenting myself. Like, I'm finally done with using this name as something to hide under. I'm gonna use it, the name Seong. I'm going to use this as my brand. This is who I am. What? And, you know, despite having my doubts, it looks like things might actually work out, which honestly was the exact kind of thing I needed. Now, is this going to be the thing is this going to be a job? Is basically the question. Probably not. I don't know if this is going to be, I don't know if this is ever going to become like formal work. Because the intention at the start wasn't necessarily for this to be my job. The idea was I was going to make this content, you know, damned if I do or not. I'm going to make this and publish it as like a resume of sorts. So that should I ever get into like some kind of digital arts kind of work, or, you know, whatever that might be, if I ever, for whatever reason, decided to take like video creation and production seriously, I can at least have something to point at, and I can be like, this is the kind of things I can do. Yeah, these are the things I've learned. These are the skill set, the traits that I have picked up over the years. Or at this point, months. But so my initial thought wasn't even I'm going to make this into my actual job, but the hope is that maybe someday it'll get there. Because I think the common theme in the Linux video and its reception, which I am, again, like nothing less than extremely thankful for, is that there is indeed some level of quality here. There is some effort that went into that. There was a lot of effort that went into that. And I'm just happy that people can actually see that, you know, there is something that goes into these things, which is really, really good, but also means, man, I'm gonna have to do this a lot if I'm like gonna, you know, make it on YouTube. And you know what? Will I? Maybe it's something I can work towards and accidentally do. I honestly wouldn't mind at all if I can still maintain this as a hobby. Because that's what this kind of is. Video creation to me is still a hobby because I'm essentially still just talking about the things that I enjoy. There's no like obligation for me in doing any of this. Like Jensen Huang isn't paying me at all to, shill for his fucking graphics cards, especially since I sure as hell didn't buy the 40 series. Yeah, I'm still gonna trash on them for all it's worth because that company is doing some really shitty things sometimes. But I'm just going to speak my thoughts on what I think. And, if people happen to agree or disagree, one, that's engagement, so it helps regardless. But two, it just helps to know that kind of stuff. So these are the sort of things that I like to do. These are the sort of things I like to talk about. This is what I kind of am. So while it might seem a little bit senseless to just be ranting about things that other people probably don't care about, I enjoy it. And I kind of want to keep doing this. And it's not that I necessarily am incapable of that either. You don't see this right now because this isn't being attached to screen recording, but I have a lot of ideas on things that could easily fill out, like, at the rate that I go out, which at this point is like a video a month, which is something I will hopefully improve, potentially. I have content that could like last me for like 2, 3, 4 years going ahead. I have so many different ideas that I put down that I want to get to at some point because these are things I want to talk about and things I like to hear other people's thoughts on. And honestly, going into 2023, man, these bikes just don't let up. Wow. One thing in 2023 I need to work on is soundproofing, but I have so many ideas that can easily fill a couple years that I am frankly excited for getting into 2023 because this allows me to like a fresh start to look at other things. And now that I know for absolute certainty after the years I've spent doubting myself, the years kind of hiding behind a name and an anime profile picture, that I can finally say for absolute certain, I can do this, I have done this before, and I'm going to do it again. And I know how to do it, I know how I want it to be, and how to make it that. Let's go. I am just so happy for that because I have so many topics that I want to cover that, honestly, the only thing I can really hope for is that other people will just be as interested. And, quality, I'm not going to keep the same level of quality because, those in-depth videos with like research and citations and like extensive thoughts takes a lot of time to do, especially in kind of my situation. A lot of times I've kind of got myself into a little bit of burnout because I spend several days at a time, almost in and out of just working on the stuff. And so one of the things I want to go into with 2023 is I want to learn how to pace myself a little bit better. So hopefully I can maybe not necessarily be better about posting things, but I can at least be confident that I will be a little bit more consistent and I will be in like a healthier mind space. Because not only would I be taking my time, but I also know that for sure that I might possibly have an audience for this kind of stuff and it might actually be worth it to some people. And nothing makes me happier than to know that I have actually informed someone and that I have helped them in some way, showed them something that they never, thought about. If it was helpful in even the slightest way, that's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. And I am more than happy to continue doing that for a lot of other things. So hopefully I'll be able to find the time to do that going into 2023 and maybe beyond. I don't know. Because I know I have things already kind of lined up. I have some smaller topics planned that are going to be talking heads of a sort, but also just kind of trying new things out. But it'll be some smaller things that'll hopefully be kind of quicker to do because they're much more like just initial impressions kind of things. But there will be things coming very soon in the new year. hopefully. And that's just assuming that I can, remember to do things, because I like to get sidetracked a lot. Hence why I do all these tangents. It's a problem, I know. But yeah, as for this being a job, it probably won't happen, because one of the other things I want to do in 2023 is actually find some kind of formal semi-professional work to do. I know that I have very little experience, and even with the YouTube pedigree, I guess, what little of this you can call a pedigree, I still have no practical work experience. So that is something I'm going to have to build up. And also I have to finish that degree I have, which has been kind of sitting dormant for 2 years at this point. Now going on to 3. So that's something I want to work on as well. Hopefully, while I'm trying to find my way in the rest of the world, I can also help to connect with you guys on this channel, and hopefully with other future content is something that will at least make you think a little bit. That's really all I want to do, and hopefully in some manner that'll happen. How long have I been going at this for now? 40 minutes? Fuck. In summation, thank you everyone so much for the support, for the comments, for the views, just showing even that little bit of interest in the work I do means significantly more than you could ever imagine. And you have my endless appreciation for that. There's going to be more stuff in the future, some of it in the same caliber. I have a lot of ideas to work on, but also hopefully more smaller things that'll just be entertaining at the very least. I hope. And hopefully there will be more people around to kind of listen to this kind of journey that I'm on, a journey of self-discovery in a way, as I am starting to learn a little bit more about myself in the process. Has become extremely enlightening for me, and I am starting to kind of think of things a little bit differently from how I started this. And in some ways it actually is positive, but I is still up for debate, I suppose, on what kind of effect this is actually going to have on me. But this is still something I want to do because it is something I feel passionate about, and it is still something that keeps me busy in the meantime, especially at this time of year. With that, that's really all I have to say about it. So, as always, be kind, be courteous, show some respect and love to the people around you. And thanks for watching.